Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our week 5, part 2 in our Parenting Today lecture series. So we're talking about the life stage of adolescence, continuing our discussion about pollutants, and we're going to shift the focus to our discussion now to focus on phthalates. So they're used in many plastic products. They're dangerous because they cannot be metabolized by the human body. The phthalates interfere with the endocrine system. Major health hazards of phthalates include premature birth, birth defects of male sex organs, reduced fertility, prostate as well as testicular cancer, learning disabilities and behavioral problems, asthma and allergies, early puberty in girls, breast growth in boys, and obesity as well as diabetes. So why does the timing of puberty matter? Well, research tells us that girls who are on time feel better about their appearance, and boys who are early feel better about their appearance and are more well regarded by peers. Early maturity is associated with more conflicted relationship with parents, more depression, as well as more high-risk behavior. So girls who are early tend to be heavier in weight and also tend to have lower self-esteem. There's a greater exposure for unwelcome attention to females, and it does increase the risk for cancer later in life. In terms of the health status of adolescents, 80.5% are in excellent or very good health, but 20.5% of adolescents are obese. So this data is the most really current comprehensive data that we have, but it's still dated, so it's between the years of 2011 and 2012. Now, switching gears, talking about intellectual development now. Piaget, remember we started talking about Piaget several weeks ago, said that the formal operation stage, which is the hallmark of adolescence for most typically developing adolescents, is the beginning of abstract reasoning. So it requires problem-solving ability, the ability to consider all possibilities, being future-focused as well as being idealistic and impatient. So parental rules can be seen as conventional, unimportant, silly, can also lead to conflict with parents or as well as other authority figures. So are adolescents thinking like adults? Well, they're becoming more intellectually competent. Parents need to teach teens to trust their own judgments. But we want to remember that the part of the brain that's most involved in emotion and social interaction becomes very active during adolescence. And the section most critical for regulating behavior is still continuing to develop into early adulthood. So adolescents are still having that maturing brain. Their brains aren't fully formed. All those synapses aren't necessarily firing together in this synchronous way. So talking about the neurobiological changes that happen with puberty, brain development continues in the frontal lobe. So in early adolescence, hormones trigger growth in the synaptic connections, or the gray matter. So in late adolescence, those synaptic connections are pruned. The myelination of nerves continues, so that increases the efficiency of the brain. So there's more white matter and less gray matter. Very important slide here. You're definitely going to see a quiz question asking you to differentiate between brain development in early adolescence as compared to brain development in late adolescence. So there's overall in adolescence, there's a greater intensity of emotion and changes in sleep patterns due to these changes in melatonin levels. So here's right here is a nice graphic pictorial guide here to the brain, which is showing in green the less developed areas of the brain. And it's on this spectrum here as we move along to the blue and to the purple that are showing the areas of the brain that are more developed. So moving on in our discussion about the adolescent brain, because the brain is forming new connections in the prefrontal area of the brain, remember that's that area that's responsible for planning, reasoning, decision-making, and problem-solving, Adolescents can seem or come across as disorganized and flaky, and they're definitely at risk for poor decision making. So in this slide right here, we see an adolescent behind the wheel. So that's actually something that's controversial. It's up for discussion in several states. Is the age of 16 or even 17 too young for an adolescent to first receive a driver's license? We are learning through new neuroscience these studies are being replicated and proven true over and over again, that adolescent brain is not fully developed, especially when it comes to decision making. So adolescents are at greater risk for poor decision making right along that same time period where they're being issued a driver's license. So it's something to think about. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear about what you guys think about that. Maybe that's something you could put on the discussion board for this week, if you have time after you finish your required discussion board posts. So right here is a slide of the adolescent brain. So it's showing us here the limbic system, which is that right there in the center for the brain. That limbic system is that area of the brain that's responsible for memory as well as emotion, regulating those real primitive emotion. So that's highlighted in red. And then in the blue area, we see that prefrontal cortex area. So that's really the neural correlate of the new man or the spirit. But that's really what differentiates us from other mammals, is our ability to really be able to engage in higher order thinking and abstract thought as well as decision making. So do adolescents think like adults? Well, the short answer is no. Teens can make decisions when they're in a calm state, but arousal tends to lead to poor decision making. So that can be arousal in terms of feeling, excited about things. It could be related to sexual arousal. And what we do know is that in the presence of peers, that risk-taking behavior increases. So that peer pressure can have serious consequences. And that's something that's known as the peer effect, which we'll discuss a little bit later. So this right here is the death rate among adolescents, the top 4 causes in 2010. You definitely want to put a circle or star around this slide because you're going to see it again. And we know that the #1 cause for death among adolescents between the ages of anywhere from 10 to 19 years is accidents. We talk about automobile accidents. 2/3 of accidental adolescent deaths are from automobile accidents. So there's 2 risk factors here that statistically are most responsible or come into play most frequently here. The first one is driving at night, and the second is driving with peers. So this may be due to inexperience, distractions, also drinking alcohol, which is implicated in 1/4 of car accidents with adolescent males, and also the whole phenomenon of adolescent egocentrism, which is that whole idea that adolescents tend to think like, this can't happen to me. Getting in an accident is not something that happens to me, it's something that happens to other people. Hallmark of that underdeveloped brain there. Risky behavior in teens, and you definitely want to check out this video by Lawrence Steinberg. You can have a link to it if you go look at the PowerPoints that are provided in Leo. I'll just address it here, hit the highlights because you'll see it on the quiz. There'll be a question about the peer effect. So what we want to remember is the number of risks that teens took in a video driving game more than doubled in the presence of their peers when compared to when they engaged in the game alone. So teens are really hardwired to take risks when they're in the presence of peers. So again, that's known as the peer effect. Put a circle or a star around that and be sure that you watch the video at a later point this week for some more information about that. We talk about sexual activity. The average age at first intercourse is 17. So we do know that teens from lower socioeconomic status are at risk for earlier sexual activity. So teens in middle as well as in high school and their parents tend to overestimate the number of teens who are having sex. That's what recent data and research tells us and has told us in the past as well. So we want to remember that pregnancy, HIV/AIDS, and sexually transmitted infections or diseases are concerns for teenagers between the ages of 15 to 17, and earlier as well, but statistically that really between the ages of 15 to 17. This right here is a list of sexual behaviors, and this was it's older data taken the year 2000 to 2002 among 15 to 17-year-olds. Between kissing, 89% of boys said that they had kissed a girl, whereas 82% of girls said that they had kissed an intimate partner. So being intimate, not specifying, actually defining what being intimate means. 65% of boys reported that they had been intimate. 47% of girls reported that they were intimate. So again, this is a self-report on sexual behaviors that was done quite a long time ago. In the US, adolescents age 15 to 19 who had never had sexual intercourse, so this is a slide from 1988 until 2013, and the probability of having had sex between the ages of 2011, or the dates 2011 to 2013 is represented here. So contraception. 21 states and Washington, D.C. allow minors to obtain contraception services without a parental involvement. I worked for an agency in Wilmington, Delaware, Children and Families First, for 9 years, and we had within our agency, there's a program called ARC, a Resource Center for Children. So that particular program provided contraception as well as pregnancy counseling, as well as pre and post HIV test counseling to teenagers aged 12 to 19 at no costs without parental consent. So it'd be interesting to know if that is something, if you're in the United States, if that's something that's available within your state. In the absence of a specific law, courts have determined that minors' privacy rights include the right to obtain contraception services. Nearly 2 million under the age of 20 were served by publicly funded, supported family planning centers in the year 2005. In the year 2006, only 5% of American high schools made condoms available to students. And in the year 2013, the American Academy of Pediatrics endorsed making condoms available in school to reduce both pregnancy as well as sexually transmitted infections. So the big question here is, are we promoting sexual activity when we provide these services to adolescents? So in the year 2002, 90% of publicly funded family planning clinics counseled clients younger than 18 about abstinence, the importance of communicating with parents about sex, or both topics. So one thing that we know is important is that if an agency is receiving federal funds, that there is a mandate now that they have to also be educating children about abstinence, as well as communicating with parents about sex, or both of these topics. Several large-scale studies around the world show that making condoms available does not promote increased sexual activity. So does contraception education work? What did the statistics say here? What does the research say? 78% of females and 85% of males use contraceptions the first time they had sex. I'm going to end the conversation here, and we will resume on part 3 of week 5, talking about pregnancy. So I'll see you in a few moments.